Test 4. Number 18. Dear members of the Toronto Public Library Board, when I first came to Canada 9 years ago, the first place I was able to find cultural integration and commonalities was in the Toronto Public Library. Gradually, that relationship with the library turned into a more emotional dependence, as I was all alone here with no family or friends. I found my way to work and finally became a Canadian citizen. However, when I heard that the Toronto Public Library Board was considering reducing service hours, I was surprised. People like me need the library more than anything. Newcomers to Canada can learn and improve in their aspirations to become better citizens through the library services, books, and kind staff at the library. I think I speak for many others in asking you to please reconsider your decision to reduce the library service hours. Thank you for taking the time to read this. Sincerely, Alicia Lee. Number 19. Anna held the blue antique jar up to the light and hoped the treasure it held was beyond her wildest dreams. Her grandmother had left the strange jar to Anna in her will, hinting that wealth lay inside. Fascinated, she pecked at the jar's wax seal with her index finger, but the wax would not move at all. Carrying the heavy jar to the sink, she soaked it in hot water until the seal dissolved. Quickly, she dried the jar and slowly lifted the lid. Several handfuls of pearly granules lay inside, smelling of salt. Frowning, she stuck her finger into the granules and tasted. Salt. It was only salt. Grandma had left money and jewelry to Anna's cousins, yet to her, Grandma's favorite, she'd left a jar of salt. Anna asked herself, "Is this all I got?" Shaking her head, Anna slammed the jar down on the table. Number 20. Creating good alternatives requires receptivity, a mind expansive, unrestrained, and open to ideas. One idea leads to another, and the more ideas you entertain, the more likely you are to find a good one. Bad ideas will almost certainly emerge along with good ones. That's a necessary part of the process, and something you shouldn't be concerned about at this point. Don't evaluate alternatives when you're generating them. That will slow the process down and dampen creativity. An obvious shortcoming, even a potentially fatal flaw, should not keep you from listing an alternative. If some aspect of the alternative is promising enough, it may be worth the effort to try to eliminate the inadequacy later. Evaluation narrows the range of alternatives. At this stage, your task is to broaden the range by bringing forward as many alternatives as possible. Number 21. As a professor of medieval history at the University of Strasbourg in the 1920s and the 1930s, before moving to the Sorbonne in Paris in 1936, Marc Bloch encouraged his students to consider the landscape as a historical document. If written texts provided a view into conscious historical processes, topography, he suggested, provided valuable insight into phenomena that were unconscious and invisible, such as social, economic, and political structure. Bloch described rural history as a vibrant human interaction with the soil. Studying the form of agricultural fields as seen from an airplane, he contended, provided insight into the society that had produced them. Bloch demonstrated these connections as he took his students on field trips into the countryside near Strasbourg to see the elongated fields of Alsace, which he considered to be characteristic of all Northern Europe. According to Bloch, students of history could best understand historical processes by looking at historical processes that were still very much alive. Number 22. Few lawyers ever take a course in public health law or even in the law's impact on public health. The law school course that generally comes closest is the course on health law, but that, not surprisingly, has followed the market and focuses generally on the regulation and provision of medical services. Few textbooks in the field devote any attention to public health, and in those that do, public health is clearly a minor theme in the major tale of the medical marketplace. Moreover, the vast majority of lawyers do not take even that course. Instead, in their courses on torts and constitutional and administrative law, they learn the values of individual rights and the perspective that economic analysis bears on decision-making. That those decisions may affect dramatically the health of a population, and that a discipline exists that sheds light on the nature and degree of those efforts are barely ever noted. Number 23. Adornment has long had a place in the house of power. It may show the position of a person in a hierarchical system of authority. It may be visible proof of affiliation with a particular political party, or dedication to one political ideology and opposition to another. If political power passes from one ideological group to another, sometimes the entering group will adopt the symbolic dress of their predecessors. Napoleon reintroduced types of dress that were symbols of state from the old regime, to support the legitimacy of his empire visually, and to unite the old and new elite. At other times, a group will institute its own symbols of dress, as did Castro and his followers when they adopted drab fatigue uniforms. At yet other times, subtle modification in dress, rather than radical change, may occur among the politically sensitive. For example, the military coups in Nigeria in the 1960s resulted in de-emphasis of the Nigerian national dress among the Igbo politicians and civil servants of eastern Nigeria because the national dress symbolized the peoples of the West and North, that is, their political opposition. Number 24. Some plant species want their seeds to be taken as far away as possible so that the seedlings do not compete with each other as they grow. When they are ready to germinate, these species make their seeds as enticing as possible by covering them in a nice, sweet, fleshy coating that will encourage herbivores to eat them. The sugary flesh provides the herbivore with energy in exchange for carrying the seeds away in their gut. A day or so later, the seeds will be excreted some distance away where they can now germinate. In fact, the seeds of some species will not germinate at all if they have not first passed through a herbivore's gut. The acids in the stomach help prepare the seed for germination. For example, by weakening the casing so that it will break open and allow the seedling to emerge. Number 25. Top 10 countries with the fastest internet speed in the world. The above table shows the list of the top 10 countries with the fastest internet speed in the world in the first 2 quarters of 2017. In the first quarter of 2017, South Korea was the country with the fastest internet speed in the world, followed by Norway. In the second quarter of 2017, the internet speed of both Hong Kong and Japan improved more than double that of the previous quarter, placing the 2 countries in the first and third places respectively. On the other hand, 3 out of the top 5 countries in the first quarter of 2017, Norway, Sweden, and Switzerland, fell out of the list of the top 10 countries in the second quarter of 2017. Israel ranked in the top 10 countries with the fastest internet speed in the second quarter of 2017, but not in the previous quarter. The top 10 countries in the second quarter of 2017 all had an internet speed of more than 30 megabits per second, faster than the fastest speed among all the countries in the previous quarter. Number 26. Found only in New Caledonia, the kagu is one of the world's rarest and most endangered birds. It has blue-gray plumage and an elegant, swept-back crest, together with long legs and a probing bill. Practically flightless, it lives on forested mountainsides and spends almost all its life on the ground. This puts kagus at special risk from introduced predators such as cats and dogs, which eat eggs as well as the adult birds. Their numbers have sharply declined since the 18th century, when European colonists arrived on their island home. Kagus feed on earthworms and other small animals and have an unusual hunting technique. Instead of keeping on the move, they repeatedly stop and wait for signs of movement in the soil or among fallen leaves, and snap up their prey with a quick peck. Kagos mate for life and often build their nests next to a stump or a fallen tree. Both parents help incubate the egg and protect the young chick. Number 27. Newport Sandcastle Contest. Come with your family and friends to this free event. You can either participate in the event or just stroll down the beach to watch all the budding sand artists hard at work. This year's theme is Sea Creatures. Date: Saturday, June 19th. Time: registration starts at 9 a.m. and ends at 10 a.m. Judging starts at noon until approximately 1 p.m. Location: Newport Beach, 3100 Ocean Boulevard. Prizes: first place, $200. Second place, $100. Third place, $50. Additional information: only sand, water, and other natural beach materials found on the beach that day can be used for construction. You need to bring your own shovel and buckets. All event participants receive a free t-shirt. For more information, please visit our website at www.newpscastlecontest.com. Number 28. Leather Bag Making Workshop. This workshop is led by our experienced instructor, Sean Aquino. He will teach attendees how to make a handmade leather bag. This is a 2-day weekend class. Dates: Saturday, September 4th and Sunday, September 5th. Time: 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Location: School of Visual Philosophy, 10th Avenue, San Jose, California. Tuition: $400. A full refund is available up to 7 days before the workshop. Notice: there are no age limits, but participants under 18 must bring a consent form signed by a parent or guardian. Attendees are allowed to bring a camera to take pictures and record the class. There will be a short lunch break. Attendees are encouraged to bring a lunch and light snacks. Parking is available in the parking lot behind our building. Please visit www.bagmakingschool.org for more information. Number 29. There is a lesson for museums in Dewey's philosophy of experience. If museums are to foster experience that is meaningful, they must balance objective environmental conditions with unknown possible consequences. They must guide visitors purposively into a world of expanding subject matter. Aimlessly presenting a succession of excitations without a form that sustains them throughout fails to lead to growth, yielding ultimate incoherency and arrest. At the same time, enforcing the necessity of doing one thing as a coerced antecedent to the occurrence of another is equally stifling. Dewey suggests that an end is not simply a last and closing term, but is a phase of a continuing process composed of prior ends of which it becomes a productive part. Museums can use their resources creatively, conferring upon them through their interactions qualities previously unrealized or unrecognized, and through such material engagements new orders of experiential consequences are generated. Number 30. How do scientific paradigms change? According to Thomas Kuhn, not very easily. First, there must be persistent observations that a currently accepted paradigm cannot explain. These are called anomalies. Usually, a single scientist or a small group of scientists will propose an alternative viewpoint, one that will account for most of the phenomena that the prevailing paradigm accounts for and will also explain the anomalies. Kuhn indicates that there is typically great resistance to the new paradigm, and that converts to it are won over very slowly. Eventually, however, the new paradigm wins out and displaces the old one. According to Kuhn, this describes what happened when Einstein challenged the Newtonian conception of the universe. Now the Einsteinian paradigm is generating its own normal science and will continue to do so until it is overthrown by another paradigm. Number 31. Although there is a general tendency to show in-group favoritism, in at least some cases this does not occur. One situation in which in-group favoritism is less likely to be found is when the members of the in-group are clearly inferior on an important dimension. The players on a baseball team that has not won a single game all season are unlikely to be able to feel very good about themselves as a team, and are pretty much forced to concede that the outgroups are better, at least as far as playing baseball is concerned. In fact, a number of studies have shown that members of low-status groups show less in-group favoritism than do members of high-status groups, and may even display out-group favoritism, in which they admit that the other groups are better than they are. If individuals from low-status groups cannot gain positive social identity through their group memberships, it is likely that they may seek to leave the in-group entirely, and the group may therefore disband. Number 32. Some organisms happen to have traits which boost their chances of surviving and reproducing. Lions that have sharper teeth get more food and survive for longer than their blunt-toothed comrades. Gazelles that have faster hooves evade the clutches of sharp-toothed lions more reliably than their sluggish running mates. In both cases, these higher achievers produce more offspring, and thus the traits that help them to do so become more common in the population. As the generations fly by, lions' fangs get sharper and sharper. Gazelles' hooves get faster and faster. In effect, nature functions as a giant animal breeder. It chooses which individuals get to reproduce and which don't, and over long periods of time adapts organisms to their environments. Of course, no one actually chooses anything. Instead, some traits just happen to persist for longer than others. And these are the traits we tend to see around us in the world. Number 33. The obvious role of sugar in ice cream is to sweeten the product. However, sugar also plays a role in determining the textural characteristics of the frozen ice cream, because sugar causes the freezing temperature of the mixture to drop. In fact, a cup of sugar in a quart of the ice cream mixture will decrease the freezing point by approximately 2 degrees Fahrenheit. This means that the ice cream must be chilled below the normal freezing temperature of water if ice crystals are to form. The greater the content of sugar in an ice cream, the lower the freezing point. This delayed freezing temperature helps to keep the size of crystals in the ice cream very small, because a reasonable amount of stirring can be done during the freezing process to help break up any ice crystal aggregates as they slowly form. Number 34. Why does the brain reward you for wanting something and then take the reward away as soon as you have it? Put it in the context of our evolutionary drives. The brain is motivating us for survival. Many things that give us pleasure are also key to our survival. We need to always be seeking out vital things in order to survive. If we were suddenly content when we got what we wanted, we wouldn't feel a need to seek out and obtain more of it. The carrot needs to be kept dangling. Satisfaction and contentment, at least of the longer-term variety, is at odds with survival. This is why the brain experiences satisfaction and pleasure all too briefly, or, more accurately speaking, why the brain experiences less pleasure the moment satisfaction is reached. Evolution built this mechanism to push us to always want more. Number 35. A central issue in art education, as in general education, is access to instruction. In very early times, the arts were either learned through group rituals that were an integral part of worship or taught to a selected few through arduous apprenticeship. While some societies regarded knowledge of the arts as the privilege of a social elite, others thought that the visual arts were subjects fit only for slaves and the children of artisans. In the 19th century working class, women in Europe could study the decorative arts, while study of the fine arts, except under highly unusual circumstances, was for men. Diverse patronage created conditions that fostered a degree of competition among artists, which in turn encouraged each artist to emphasize his or her own individual style. Thus, all through the history of art education, access to instruction was affected by class, gender, and the general social status of the visual arts as a subject for study. Number 36. To be candidates for domestication, animals had to tolerate being crowded together in a small space without panicking and be willing to reproduce in captivity. Only a few animals possess these qualities. Their domestication usually involved a mutation called neoteny, or retaining youthful physiology and behavior into adulthood. Young mammals are full of curiosity, unafraid of animals of other species, and eager to learn new tricks. House cats, for instance, act like the kittens of wild cats. Such qualities were particularly useful when animals migrated to a new territory, as happened frequently during and after the Ice Age. Humans took advantage of these behaviors by capturing young animals, keeping those who retained their juvenile behaviors longest, and letting them mate. After a few generations, they had animals that were permanently juvenile in behavior and kept their juvenile appearance, such as shorter muzzles, rounded heads, crowded teeth, and smaller brains. Number 37. The capacity for human reasoning is extraordinary. Reasoning involves making suppositions and inferring their consequences. This may be complicated, involving mathematics, for example. But what makes great thinking so difficult is having the imagination to ask the right questions, or the ability to see things from a completely new perspective. When Einstein developed his theory of relativity, the physics of Isaac Newton was so strongly supported by available evidence that there seemed no reason to question it. Almost all known experiments confirmed his predictions, but there were some odd studies suggesting that the speed of light did not depend on the speed of the source from which it was emitted. In trying to understand this, Einstein somehow came up with the idea that the speed of light was constant, which meant that time had to be relative. All previous physicists, including Newton, had assumed time to be absolute. From this immensely creative idea, with the help of a great deal of complex mathematics, came the theories of special and general relativity that revolutionized physics. Number 38. Our species is the only one that voluntarily shares information. We learn a lot from our fellow humans through language. This ability remains beyond the reach of current neural networks. In these models, knowledge is encrypted, diluted in the values of hundreds of millions of synaptic weights. In this hidden, implicit form, it cannot be extracted and selectively shared with others. In our brains, by contrast, the highest level information, which reaches our consciousness, can be explicitly stated to others. Conscious knowledge comes with verbal reportability. Whenever we understand something in a sufficiently clear manner, a mental formula resonates in our language of thought, and we can use the words of language to report it. The extraordinary efficiency with which we manage to share our knowledge with others, using a minimum number of words to get to the market, turn right on the small street behind the church, remains unequaled in the animal kingdom as in the computer world. Number 39. How does a community or society determine how many productive resources to devote to water quality or to any other energy or environmental problem? The economic concept of marginalism helps to answer this question. The basic idea of optimality is that after some point, it is not wise to devote additional productive resources to water quality, since the additional costs of continuing to improve water quality become greater than the additional benefits. After some point, it is better to devote scarce productive resources to other valuable purposes. Marginal analysis includes careful consideration of monetary estimates of the costs and benefits of policy opinions. This can be difficult, especially assigning monetary values to things such as the recreational and aesthetic value of clean water. For different people, these values will vary. Despite the difficulties, marginal analysis gives policymakers their best tool in analyzing energy and environmental issues. Number 40. To make decisions and move forward, the brain has to generate and maintain a consistent sense of self. If we're going to make predictions about what is going to be good or bad for us, we have to understand who we are. Memory is key here. It's the glue that keeps our selfhood intact, the means by which our continuity is maintained. In reality, we're constantly evolving and changing. As T.S. Eliot described it, you are not the same people who left that station or who will arrive at any terminus. As a matter of biology, even our very cells completely recycle every 7 years or so. Through all this change, our sense of self persists because of memory and its ability to connect us to the past. You wake up every morning as a slightly different physical entity, but memory stitches you together as a single, consistent, coherent being. Thanks to memory, we are able to maintain the consistency of our selfhood, despite all the changes we continuously experience. Number 41 to 42. Our ancestors learned to capture wild flames to produce their own fires. This was a giant step in our relationship with fire. So it is remarkable to note that some populations of Australian raptors, including black kites, also have a fire-spreading culture. Known to Aboriginal people as firehawks, the birds pick up flaming twigs from wildfires and then deliberately start fires elsewhere in order to flush out prey from grasses. It is easy to picture our smart ancestors doing the same millions of years ago, and then carrying embers from camp to camp. Good, dependable social networks would have been essential to maintain these legacy fires' sustainability over time and across different locations. So, as we became ever more reliant on fire, we thus became more reliant on each other. Fire was a security blanket, whereas our earliest human ancestors had bedded down in tree nests for safety. Fire protected their descendants from predators and the cold, allowing them to sleep in open savannas. In other words, fire culture was adapting our species' habitat for their survival. As fire made our world safer, we altered the environmental selection pressures acting on our genes. We were not the first animal to alter its environment, of course, but most other creatures do this instinctually, meaning they are genetically programmed to modify their environment in a species-specific way. Beavers may construct dams and ants make complex mounds, but never vice versa. Humans, by contrast, are not pre-programmed to any specific environmental modification, but we are exceptionally creative, and over time our ancestors' genes evolved in response to this new, culturally determined environment. Number 43 through 45. Amy was trying to explain to her grandmother how to use the new video. "I've got it now," said Gran. "This button is play." "No, that's stop," said Amy. "I must go, but I'll come back tomorrow and explain again." The next day, Amy stopped at her Gran's after work. She found her happily watching a film from the day before. Gran told Amy, "A young man has just moved into the house next door. He did it for me. He said he will help me every day." A few days later, when Amy visited her grandmother again, she saw there was a bouquet of tulips on Gran's TV. Gran said, "Do you like the flowers my young man gave me? He's charming, but he needs his hair cut. It's too long." "You don't give him money, do you?" Amy asked. "Just a few pence for setting up the video. I promised him a present if he gets his hair cut. He wants a car, but I don't know if they're expensive," Gran answered. Amy thought it was not good to give money to a next-door neighbor. Will you see him today? She asked. Oh, yes. He's coming at 6 for the John Wayne film, Gran said. As she left the house, Amy saw there were tulips in the garden next door. Some were missing. She phoned her husband and explained the situation. She told him that he must come to Gran's at 6 to meet the young man next door. Yes, that's incredible. Taking money for setting up a video. Easy money, he replied. At 10 to 6, Amy arrived at her Gran's. In front of the video was a young man. He had short hair and 2 front teeth missing. Amy decided he must be 7 years old. His name was Daniel. Thank you, young man, said Gran. She handed him 10 pence. He lives with his dad. I look after him while his dad is decorating the house, Gran explained. Daniel took a red car from his pocket. So you bought the car, said Amy, laughing. Yes, it only cost 50 pence at the market, and his dad pays me £2 an hour to look after him. Easy money, said Gran.